Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Gary Bolton, and I'm joined by Lee. Hi, Lee.
Good morning, Gary. How are you today?
I'm good. Obviously, it's only a best before date. Nice little podcast that we've decided to put together, Lee. But first of all, first episode, who are we? Tell me about yourself, Lee.
Very good question. Good morning, Gary. Gary and I have known each other for about a month. Introduced by a mutual friend.
Who's our mutual friend, Lee?
Our mutual friend is Steve Kelly of GS1. So it's so
Morning,
there we go.
Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. So we've been introduced, and we find that we have been walking the same corridors for 25 years. So I've been working for Domino for 25 years. I've just retired from Domino, and I'm trying to find part-time work. And for Domino, I worked over all the different technologies that they had, and I was kind of business development and technology evaluation, bringing through and innovation. And I've been working on 2D codes since 2004, when there was this 2D veterinary application, which was the first thing I came across. How about yourself, Gary?
Yeah, very similar. As you know, obviously been in this industry for over 25 years, mainly with VideoJet and marketing image. Like yourself, I was in business development, and then I progressed into product management for CRJ and TTO. For people that don't know this industry, CRJ is continuous inkjet and thermal transfer over printers, but I'm sure we'll talk about that technology in other episodes. So yeah, similar to you. It's weird to think, Lee, it's half of my life in this industry.
It is, isn't it? I joined from a different industry. I was originally a production engineer and a production manager, so I kind of have that spirit in my early years.
Do you know what this is where we're so similar, because I was an engineer before I started in this.
I got a tap on the shoulder one day and said, "My son, you're going to marketing." And I thought, oh, that's a surprise. So I've done kind of lots of business to business marketing. But the 25 years in this industry, 20 years of thinking these 2D codes are going to take off sometime. They've got lots of advantages. That they take up less space, they work better. And on top of that, my brother-in-law used to work for Intermec, and he was selling barcode systems 5 years earlier than I was aware. And I remember him taking me aside and saying, "Hey, look at this. It's a data matrix code. It's amazing. It's going to change the world." That was about 1990.
But you know what, Lee? This gets me to the point of why we're actually doing this.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, we've not known each other a long time, but one of the reasons why we decided to do a podcast is purely on this 2D and QR revolution. And it's become a big topic. And I think doing this podcast, there's lots of people that say a lot of things. I think us two, we hit it off really well when we first met. It's good that we can just have a conversation and share our thoughts on various topics. And obviously, we're starting talking about 2D and QR. But yeah, what's your thoughts? We're going to do this. Why do you think we're going to stand out from everybody else?
Why are we going to stand out? Well, I think, my observation about 2D is that there's lots of material out there which is talking about why 2D is great and all the things you can do with 2D, consumer interaction, digital product passports, all kinds of other things. But the reality is all of that hinges on the practical subject of how does a manufacturer get a 2D code on their product reliably without slowing their production line down and without generating waste. And the other conversations are great. They're very relevant. They're all the reasons why somebody like Tesco's would want to make that move. But if you're a production manager, they don't really help you very much with I've got this product, I now need to replace that sell-by date by a 2D code.
So let me jump in. Sorry for the listeners and viewers. You're touching on this wonderful topic of Sunrise 2027.
I am. In fact, I'm jumping in without naming it. Sorry about that, Gary.
But this is one of the reasons why we're having this discussion. I mean, let's just say I'm the simpler one in this duo, Lee. I've got my view on Sunrise 2027. Explain it. Just in simple terms, in your view. I'll give you my view, and it might vary very wildly to yours, but in simple terms, what is Sunrise 2027?
Well, the barcode is 50 years old now. And at the time, it was the best that you could do with the technology that was available. In the intervening 50 years, printing technology and reading technologies moved forward, and you now have these 2D codes which allow you to get much more information in a smaller space. And on top of that, read them more reliably. Now, GS1 is all about making sure that barcodes work in retail and work in retail supply chains. And GS1 has now decided that the 2D technology is at the point where it can back it. So it set a sunrise date, and that means a date at which everybody in the supply chain should be able to read these codes of 2027. But the key point is GS1 is not the law. GS1 is an organization that encourages people that use its standards to move. And therefore, sunrise isn't a hard date. You can start early or you can start late. And it's not the end of the 1D barcode, it's the introduction of something new.
So this is really, you mentioned it earlier, 50 years of barcoding, and like I said, we've been in this for a long time. And one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, it's only a best before date, because back then people weren't too bothered about it with people that we were dealing with. And what you're talking about over the years has just gone to a different level, and again, just to people that are listening here, there might be people in the general public, consumers, and we've got manufacturers. This Sunrise 2027 is such a revolution in packaging and identification of packaging. Is that right? And first of all, there's people see a best before date and people see a used by date. Really, in my view, and this is my understanding over the years, a best before date is mainly about the quality, whether it looks, smells, tastes okay. And then used by is really the safety side of things, when it's good, not to eat it. Is that your interpretation of that level? So just to take it down to the granular level before we go on to that huge topic of how it's evolved over the years.
So absolutely agree with you, Gary. A best before date is the date after which the product is going to start to be less tasty or less attractive to look at, whereas a use by date comes from usually some kind of safety testing that proves that the product is safe. So if you've got a use by date, you can be pretty sure it's safe to eat up to that point, and it tends to be on things like drugs and things that can go off and give you food poisoning. Whereas best before dates is all about stock rotation and making sure that the stuff that you've got in the cupboard is still going to taste nice when you eat it.
So it's safe to say, you start talking about Sunrise 2027. This coding and marking sort of revolution as such over the 25 years since we've been doing it, it was back then, it was just the best before date. Now it's just gone to another level. Now, apologies, this is my simple interpretation of what Sunrise 2027 is. Right, you said you've got a barcode, which everybody sees on a pack, and that is scanned at the till. There's going to be a different kind of barcode, which is the QR code, which I'll let you talk about in a second. But basically, and this is, I think there's two parts to this, and this is my simplistic view. There's a consumer side of things, and then there's the manufacturer side of things. So we mentioned Tesco's. So for manufacturers of the products that we all eat on a day-to-day basis, for manufacturers, obviously your Tesco's, your Sainsbury's, people like that, holding all this kind of food in a warehouse can have a significant impact. So understanding the supply chain, the inventory of stock of products. So for example, if you've got 1 million packets of smoky bacon crisps, chips, people who are listening in America, or you've got prawn cocktail, and you sell 500,000 of smoky bacon and 1,000 of prawn cocktail, this Sunrise 2027, because of its digital link, it's going to help inventory management. And being in this industry, inventory management is a huge cost. to a lot of people. If you hold a lot of inventory, it costs you a lot of money. So Sunrise 2027 is going to help the people like Tesco's to manage that and save the money as well. From a consumer side of things, they're not interested in that. So it's going to be a different experience for them, where they're going to encourage people to be more involved in what they eat. So they'll scan the QR code. It'll take them to a nice flowery meadow of where this milk is produced and this cheese is produced, just to give them a nice touchy-feely about what they're buying and comfort. Is that my simplistic view there, Lee?
So it's a really interesting point. So from the point of view of a consumer, and then we're all consumers in our home lives. The best before date is about telling you when you can use the product. But from the point of view of someone like Tesco's or their suppliers, the best before date is telling you how long that product has got before it has to come off the shelf. So, I remember back to, I'm old enough to remember the days of people putting price labels on products on the shelves and people keying it into a register at the till. And my mother then going home and checking that we'd actually got charged the right amount for things. And and that kind of thing was replaced. And we've forgotten the fact that now scanning at the till has really improved accuracy, and that's why, and that means that Tesco's, for example, a retailer, is now able to reorder and make sure that they've got the right stuff on the shelves at the right time. So you don't walk around the shelves these days and find gaps, because they've got a system that uses the barcodes to replenish. What the QR code does, and what Sunrise does, is it allows them to also put expiry dates and batch numbers in there. Now, the expiry dates today are also used. If you take a product back, they'll use that expiry date to track back to what's happened with that product and work out whether they have to do something to make sure that they don't do that again. So batch codes aren't just for the consumer, they're also for stock control. What's going to happen with 2D codes is, instead of that being manually read, it's going to be automatically read into the store and out of the store. So the store will know what their shelf inventory is, and therefore it'll know when it's time to order the next stuff, or when it's time to go out there and discount the stuff that you've got left. So what it's going to do is it's going to move that stock control up another order of magnitude, cut the amount of waste in the store, and give the people in the customers, the reassurance that what they're buying is in date, and hopefully eventually has got a long sell by date on it, a long use by date. He says, falling into his own trap.
It sounds, from an outsider looking in, it sounds extremely complex. And I can imagine, and we've talked about this for a long, long time, even in a month, how's this going to affect your food manufacturers? Because, by the sounds of it, this is not just we're printing the best before date. Now we've got to add a QR code to the packaging. Is this going to be a redesign of packaging? Is it dynamic, first of all? So dynamic means it's all got variable information in there that's updated at a regular time. Is that going to be the case, that it's going to be variable QR codes on packaging, or is it fixed? And then there's the other side of, these manufacturing sites, they've got 30 plus production lines, and they've got printing equipment, what we know, that are printing this kind of information. From a manufacturer's point of view, there's so many topics to think about here. There's, how does it affect our packaging? Does that need to change? The equipment, is the equipment good enough? I'm not saying it's not good enough. Is it capable of meeting those requirements to even print a QR code additionally to a best before and use by date? And then beyond that, I'm sure there's other elements to this. Like you talk about, obviously, digital linking this, but in my head, that's software. So do you need a software system? And again, this is where the complexity lies. And this is where we've had so many conversations about this. The understanding of what's going to be required, and this is no criticism of anybody putting this in place. There's thousands and thousands of food manufacturers in the UK, and I think it's fair to say this is probably where it's being driven the most. And I'm sure you'll talk about digital link, and then there's in Europe, and then there's America as well, but it's a very different kind of topic. But the UK, there's thousands and thousands of manufacturing sites for foods. What's your thoughts on that? Am I right in thinking there's lots of complexities around this?
I think it's easy to get scared by the complexity, but in the end, it's a relatively simple process you have to go through to make up your mind about what you want to do. So today, the barcode is printed on the pack. And if for certain types of product where, for example, you've got a really long shelf life, and really the benefit to the manufacturer is just the digital link side. The digital link side, by the way, just to explain that, this is the ability for you to scan that same QR code that's used at the retail till to give the consumer a series of bits of other information. What it is, that's up to the brand owner or the retailer as to what's available through the digital link. But it's just basically opening the door. If you're not interested in scanning that barcode with your phone, you don't have to. It's going to work at the till exactly like you have today. But if you want to scan it, you can. Now, if you've got a very long shelf life product and you're not interested in tracing them any more than you do today, and I think that's missing opportunities if you don't, then you could just change the artwork on the pack and have a digital link QR code on the, QR code powered by GS1 on the pack, and that would be the end of the story.
Give me an
However,
example.
that also, for example, there are some people in the medical industry who are already putting QR codes on products,
Right.
and that QR code takes the consumer to a page where, for example, you can download the patient safety leaflet in multiple languages, or you can download it in an accessible format. So, that's what that's basically doing is it's not replacing the patient safety leaflet because you still have to have one, but it's allowing people that couldn't use that patient safety leaflet to get more information. So
Do you know
that's an
what?
example. That's a kind of, if you like, the floor level version of what you can do.
You mentioned something there about with pharmaceutical. We can go down, and I think this is where this particular topic, it goes down so many rabbit holes of understanding. You talk about pharmaceutical, how secure is a QR code? Can it be copied? Is there going to be any compliance issues there, anti-counterfeiting issues? Is there going to be some kind of security within these? And I think, again, this is down another rabbit hole of people doing this and going, okay, this is great, but is it secure? Is it going to make my product secure and not be at risk of anti-counterfeiting? Because I think, we spoke earlier, many years ago, dealing with pharmaceutical companies, 2D data matrix. And I remember, 20 odd years ago, working with a big pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca, talking about 2D data matrix because of anti-counterfeiting. So in this, and I'm sorry, taking it down a different rabbit hole, does that cause another level of complexity of security?
That's a whole new episode, I think.
I think so.
That one is probably one to avoid today, I'm afraid.
but I think it's a fair topic that people will think about. Yeah.
I think for me, if we're going to go back on topic a bit here, for me, there's a series of this change in Sunrise. There's a series of benefits for the retailers, which are also, by the way, benefits for the manufacturers. Because if you've got more control over the stuff in your factory, it's then much quicker for you to find problems. Because let's be honest, every factory has problems from time to time. And the efficiency of your production management team is how quickly you get on top of those and deal with them and get rid of them. Having the ability to track products more accurately. So instead of tracking them by SKU, you can track them, stock keeping unit, by item type. Being able to track them by batch gives you a better idea. So if all the ones that you've got a problem with are on a particular batch, or if you've got multiple sets of tooling, being able to, tool marks and things like that, so you can spot which set of tooling is causing a problem if you've got a really complicated production line. All of these things help you with finding problems. And then there are certain types of products, particularly regulated products, where you have to serialize products, so every single product is unique. And that gives you the gold standard of traceability. And that's the one that really allows you to do things to prevent counterfeits. Because if every item's unique, you can then start to spot when the counterfeiters start copying items, and then you can do something about it. But a QR code is an identification technology. It's not an authentication technology. It's about having a closed loop control. It's not about being able to say, is this genuine on its own?
And again,
it's part of the story.
This is going back to that topic of, from a manufacturer's standpoint, am I going to need some kind of software to manage that kind of
Ah,
information as well? So again,
I,
this is
I,
where it goes down so many rabbit holes on this
well, I'd
topic.
like to move it back a stage and say, that if you're in the food industry, the number one cause of recalls from or rejections from retailers is coding and marking type issues. And now you're going to be asked to do more. You're going to be asked to put a QR code on there, and that QR code has got to then scan at the till. So you need to think about quality management as part of the process. And you're
What
going to be,
typically from your point of view, and again, things I've experienced over the years,
yeah,
when you talk about that particular thing, obviously the best before day traceability data is so important. And obviously this is going to become more important because it's got to stay effectively on the product. And we talk about different technologies. We've got inkjet, we've got laser, we've got thermal transfer printers. All those kind of technologies work very, very differently with different materials. And I've experienced it in the past, working in hot countries in the Middle East where the temperatures get above 40 degrees. Sometimes these products are manufactured to get through to the warehouse and the product could have come off in transit. So obviously talking about making sure you've got this full level of traceability with this QR code. If that happens, what does that mean to the manufacturer?
well, I think you can take it at different levels. The manufacturer needs to make sure that when the product gets to the till, it works. And you can do that by, if you've got batch level traceability and batch level coding, you can do a kind of first in run, every half hour, end of run type check, and you can check that the product quality is there. But you probably need to make sure that the process has been built to be consistent enough that you don't get rejects in that time. However, if you're going to have unique serial numbers or you're going to have much more variable data, you probably need to think about some kind of camera system in order to be able to make sure that you're checking everything's 100% right. Now, those camera systems are a lot cheaper than they used to be, but they're not free.
Yeah.
So you've got to
But
think about the
there's
whole
the software.
system.
There's the software alongside that as well.
Well, there's also the whole kind of synchronization
Yeah.
question. And if you look at what goes wrong with coding and marking, it's often not the printing that's gone wrong; it's the wrong entering the wrong data.
Correct. Yeah.
And when you're entering more data, which you are here, you probably need to think about how do I make sure that the right data is going into the system. Now, your business systems will have that data. And the question then is, how do you get a piece of bridge software that pulls that data out, makes sure it's right, and then also gets a camera system afterwards that checks that everything's good? Because that's the way that you're going to get 100% good result. And that's the way that you're going to know that the system you've built is
Do you know
good.
what, Lee? This blows my mind. Seriously, because you're just thinking, oh my word. I wanted a QR code, but thinking about me coding equipment. Is it going to be right? Do we need a camera? Do we need software? This is where it's so much of a big
But
topic. And Lee, we've spoken about this. I think we
yeah,
have a really good understanding of it. And there's lots and lots of information out there on this topic. Do you think that some of the things that are being put out there do cause confusion? I know we've created three pillars of real good information here. It's obviously what the QR code is. Obviously, is the equipment right? Do you need software? Do you need this?
yeah.
There's lots of confusion from other people saying different things. And you know, is it right? Do people have their own agenda to satisfy their own bias towards their kind of technology? If that makes sense.
I think there's a lot of very clever technology out there that could work and could make things better, but they all rely on getting the fundamentals right first. And I think one of my worries is that there's a lot of people taking the opportunity to promote something extra, something on top of the basic requirements that, that might be great in 2 years' time to look at. But at the
Yeah.
moment, what people want to do is get to the point of, does it work at the till every time? Is the information right? Does it work on all the types of packs that you want to deliver it on? One of the other points is that the food supply chain is really complex. There's lots of different types of food. Where they're packed varies depending on the product. some of the frozen stuff that you find in the ready meal section of the supermarket actually was produced in Asia and packed in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to be able to get this done, you've got to, you as a manufacturer have got to deal with your subcontractors or your suppliers in wherever you're getting your product from, and get them to give the information. So it's not just your own factories. You also need to work with your partners in order to make it work.
Do you know, as daft as this sounds, is this going to be implemented on direct produce? So you look at fruit, you look at eggs. Eggs, for example, have a best before and use by date. Are you going to see a QR code on an egg?
At the moment, I doubt you're going to see it directly on the egg, but you never know. Simply for various reasons. And this is the risk of going print geeky, because an egg isn't flat, and therefore printing a QR code on something that's not flat isn't necessarily easy. But I think all the time, one of the key questions that people have got to ask is, what change gives the best value for money? So as a manufacturer, you've got to satisfy your retailers. And what's the change that's going to satisfy your retailers at step one? And if that change then also allows you to be a bit more efficient yourself internally, that's great. And then step two, things like anti-counterfeiting, future EU legislation, future US legislation, all this stuff can be supported by this change. But actually,
so it's going to be easy. So it's going to be easy to implement. Basically.
It will, once you've got to QR, this other stuff, you've got more control over what your products are and where they are in your supply chain. So that's going to help. But that's going to open the door for new stuff in the future. But that new stuff at the moment, you can spend too much time thinking about it, when what you want to do is get to base one, which is everything that's got, my belief is the first products that will pay off for the retailers are the things with short shelf life, because they're the ones that they throw away. They're the ones that they have.
Give an example of a short shelf life product.
Sandwich, milk, cream, fruit, proteins, or put that into English, meat, fish, and other proteins. All these kind of things, they go off. They've got to be looked after. They've got to be handled. They often have to go through cold chain. That means keeping them cold all the way to the supermarket. All of these things, and hopefully all the way home as well. That's a bit harder today. But all of those things are the things where the retailers today have product that doesn't sell on time. It gets left somewhere. It gets missed. And then there's food waste. And
it's those kind of. That's a huge topic for years on food waste, sustainability, all this kind of stuff. So this is obviously going to get dragged into this.
It is stage one benefit, all about food waste, all about supply chain management. And I think for me, one of the risks about talking about these future things gets the business development people and the marketing people and the retailers and the brand owners excited. But from a manufacturing point of view, you've got to make, where the pedal hits the metal, you've got to get that QR code on the product and still make the same number every day.
So it's called Sunrise 2027. Does this mean I've got, as a manufacturer, I've got to have everything in place by 2027, or I can't sell my product? What? Go on, give me.
No.
People will generally think it's called Sunrise 2027. I've got to have this in place. What's going to happen to me?
And I think people are being a bit naughty. I read articles which say it's the law. You won't be able to sell after this date if you don't do this, and that is absolutely not true.
I've seen that, by the way.
I've seen it written down. I've sat in presentations, and I've sat there and sort of spat my coffee down my front of my face the first time that happened. It's kind of always wear a brown shirt in an event like that. It's a good idea. Anyway, but that kind of thing, it's not the law. However, more and more of your customers will come to you and say they want this, and they won't buy the products if you don't. So by customers,
you're meaning the likes of the supermarkets.
I mean, own brands of, Tesco's will say, we want these products to have these changes on by a certain date. They've got an active team that are setting that timetable out. You can find that information online. There are other supermarkets working on that. But there are also brand owners that will be driving it at the same time. But the brand owners are going to be stuck because they're still going to have the 1D code for the customers, for their customers that can only do 1D, and the 2D code as well. And then there'll be this period.
That's an interesting thing, because surely it's not going to switch over overnight. It's
No,
got
it's
to be a
not.
transitional thing. So I would imagine that you're going to see a 1D barcode, which is typically the standard barcode that you'll see on packaging, alongside your QR code. And then as these manufacturers fully implement their systems, that 1D barcode will disappear. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, although I think the key thing is actually the retailer and the person that's buying the product from the manufacturer's ability to read that 2D code, not the manufacturer. I think manufacturers will want to make that change once they see the benefits.
Again, this is another topic again. Who is this going to be important to? So from a manufacturer side of things, who are the people that need to lead this? Is it quality people? Is it the marketing people? Is it engineering managers, operation managers, production managers? Who's it going to be?
Going to depend a little bit, but I suspect what's going to happen is that you're going to get the compliance people get an email from the customer saying we want this by this date, and that might be compliance or it might be sales, but there's going to be some pressure from the customer, and then though internally there will then be a project team depending on the shape of the business. If it's all internally manufactured, it'll be an internal team. If you buy some of your products in and you make some of your own products, you're then going to have to work with your suppliers.
But you know what? There are big manufacturing companies. I was at one the other week, but they've got the infrastructure to support it. So your bigger manufacturing companies will have those resources to make these changes and get other, like you said, get teams involved. Obviously a production manager, they need to know how that's going to implement affect the production line. The operation managers overseeing all this, the engineering manager, how they're going to look after this as well. Marketing people are all very important because they want to understand how can we promote our product better with this QR code. So you're right, having that team, but not everybody has that level of people within their organization. So how are they going to go about this? I mean, I know we can talk to these people, Lee, and feel free to message us on this topic if you are unsure. But is that the case? Are there going to be
I,
people that can't manage the whole process?
it's a proper change management process, isn't it? In the end, every business needs to work out how it manages change, and I think this is a change management process. And I think part of the difficulty here is that a lot of the promotion, a lot of the stuff you find online is all about the kind of consumer benefits,
Yeah.
and there's not so much about how to do it internally. And I think that there are a few key decisions that you need to make in that process in order to work out what change you're trying to affect before you then start talking to the vendors that are going to supply you, so that you can answer those questions about what do you want, that lead you to questions like what kind of code do I want? Do I want fixed or do I want a variably printed one? How big is it going to be? Well, that depends on how much information you put inside it.
But you've made me think about something. Honestly, we can bore people to death about barcodes, but you look at the cardboard boxes that all these
Yeah,
products come in. Now, they have a certain type of barcode for warehousing.
they
Is
do.
that going to be replaced by a QR code?
Not at the moment. There's a longer term plan for that, but at the moment, the entire focus of the Sunrise Initiative is on the things that go through the till. It's not the 2D code. There's not a plan for 2D codes in the warehouse, and the reason for that is those barcodes that you have in the warehouse already have some of the features of the 2D codes in an earlier technology. So you can put best before dates, you can put expiry dates, you can put serial numbers in those barcodes already. And there are thousands of scanners around the world on forklifts, on conveyor belts, on things like
Uh,
that would need to change in order to change to 2D. And if you like, they're ahead of the retail barcode today, and the retail barcode is now going to jump ahead again because it's going to be able to have more stuff. And there'll be another change. But this is just an evolution.
but it's fair to ask the question: should
Yeah.
some of these manufacturers be prepared for that? Because I can't remember the barcode. What is it? Is it the ITF 14 with a big border
Oh,
around it?
we're going to get very geeky here. ITF
Yeah,
14
but anyway,
or EAN 13 or GS 1128.
but obviously you have them on the cardboard boxes, and there's been occasions when these can't read and they get rejected. We spoke about better reliability with this barcode and quality. A QR code, obviously, it can hold a lot more information. It can have a bit of damage to it, but still read it.
Yeah, that's a big
So
advantage.
again, should this be something that beyond the primary side of things with the food, from the secondary and tertiary, should people think about changing that barcode at some point and be ready, be prepared for it?
Well, I think there's another argument also going on in the secondary and tertiary space, which is all about RFID. So I think if you look at RFID, one of the big couriers inside the US has just put RFID readers on everything. So every truck, every person that's delivering to your door, every skillet, everywhere. So they can then see where everybody's parcel is all the time. And I think that if you're in warehouse management, your goal is you want to know where your inventory is. So that's fantastic. So I think there's a debate about whether 2D or RFID is the best thing for those kind of packs.
And it's a good topic. And I think, to people listening out there, feel free to get in touch. I'll put the email address. So obviously, Lee, I'm setting up an email address for you. But if you do want to send an email, it's gary@myedgecraft.co.uk. Send us a question. And if you've got anything that we've spoken about, or something that you're unsure of, just send it. We can talk about it in later things. But I think it's the primary side of things with the packaging that you see on the shelf is the biggest area that affects Sunrise 2027.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when we say primary, we mean the pack you hold in your hand when you buy it.
Sorry, that's
that's just another industry thing. So yeah, it's all about that, and it's about that linkage of the information online to the product you've got in your hand.
Do you know what? I think it might be good. I know we know a lot of people in this industry in various guises. I think let's get a special guest on next time. Let's have their view, because I'm sure we know people in this industry, Lee, that we can invite. I'm sure they'd like to give their views. I mean, I'm sure they'd turn around and say you two are just talking a complete load of rubbish. But it'd be good to get their point of view as well, to connect the dots.
I think for me, the key thing we can do here is try and deal with the myths.
Yes.
And it's kind of myth busting. Because there's this 2D change. A lot of the printers that are out there are already able to print these 2D codes, but you still need to make sure that they're going to read properly at the till, and you still need to make sure that the information that you're putting into the code is right, so it reads correctly at the till. So, there's a kind of control thing there. So it's not just a question of turning it on. You have to kind of step back and say, how do I make sure that I'm not going to create new problems as part of this? But then there's other types of technology out there that are absolutely great for printing sell-by dates. But when you start to ask them to print a QR code, you kind of either slow them down massively so they don't keep up with the production line, or they just simply don't have the print capability. And sometimes there's a kind of middle layer where the printer's quite capable, but the way that you're handling the product at the moment means that the accuracy is not there.
Do you know what?
There's a kind of helping people to look at each install and say, what do I have to change to get there?
And this is going to be another episode in itself, talking about the different types of technologies to suit it as well, because it again, we spoke about it earlier, it holds a different kind of complexity of what I can and can do with that technology, but we'll talk about that in another episode. So really, I think we've spoken about it, but key takeaways for this, you talk about myths. What are the myths? Let's just conclude on what those myths are.
So the myths are, one, it's not the law. You need to talk to your customers and work out when you've got to change and what you've got to change in order to get there, I would say.
Yep.
Secondly, you need to make sure it's not just a printing issue. It's making sure you're getting the right information in these barcodes when you print them. And then you do need to make sure that you've got a quality management process that makes sure that you're assessing the quality of the barcode as well as the quality of the rest of the pack at the same time, and satisfying your customers. And I'd say that the last myth is you probably won't need to replace all your equipment, but you do need to go through and look at all of your equipment on your production line and work out what has to change in each stage.
So I think it's fair to say, don't panic. Don't panic.
Don't panic, absolutely. That maybe ought to be the name.
Don't panic.
The Don't Panic. The
It's
Don't
only the
Panic
best before day.
podcast.
Don't panic.
Yeah, it's a cheat. You know, there are people that will be able to make this change for nearly no money, and there's other people where it'll be more important. It'll be more difficult. There's probably going to be some need for artwork change. So there's a kind of change management process to go with that. But it's all doable. But what you need is advice to make this problem smaller. You know, it's the old, you can eat an elephant one bite at a time. Actually, this is quite a small elephant. So it's not very many bites to eat it, providing you get good advice at the beginning about how to make this problem as small as possible.
And it's like I said earlier, there's going to be companies that have got bigger internal teams that can manage that and discuss internally. And like I said, feel free to reach out to myself or Lee. We can discuss it with you. We can talk about it with you as well, just to help you along if you've got any concerns with it as well. But I think it's been a good topic in our first episode, Lee. We could go on for a lot longer, but yeah, I think going forward, let's try and get somebody. I like our views. You obviously know your stuff better than me, Lee. I've told you I'm a very simplistic kind of guy. I like to keep it simple.
You know how it goes. The longer in your career, you know more and more about less and less till you know everything about nothing. So it's I think I'm not sure that's an Alice in Wonderland quote, but you know it's that question about getting the right advice.
But yeah, so I think this is a natural sort of conclusion to this third podcast. Is there anything that you want to finish with?
Don't panic.
Don't panic, indeed. Thank you, everybody. This is the first episode of It's Only a Best Before Date. Thank you very much. I'm Gary.
I'm Lee. Thank you for listening.
We'll speak to you next time. Thank you very much.